It is finally time to build a piece of furniture. So this commission is a coffee table and I'm making it of beech. So I got that beech from my local wood supplier, Top Tread Stairways. And I want to talk about these guys for a second because not only do they have every kind of hardwood that you need, they also have amazing slabs, stuff like this or this or this, also some of these. And they also provide milling services. So I get my tabletops flattened over here sometimes and stuff like that. They have excellent customer service. They will climb over wood piles like little mountain goats to pull the last beech out of southern Arizona for you. And then on top of all of that, they build these amazing staircases, like this lighted staircase, this modern staircase, these alternating tread pattern staircases, monostringers. But the thing that put Clyde on the map are these spiraling slide staircases. And I think he's built a few of these things now. I totally recommend going and checking out his site. He builds the most amazing staircases, things that I couldn't even imagine. Being in Clyde's shop always makes my garage feel even more ridiculous, but regardless, we're going to try to make some magic happen here. So right now I'm just laying out the wood and taking a look over it, and I'm just looking for any sort of defects or problems that I'm going to want to try to work around. And this beach was actually really clear and didn't seem to have very many problems. There was one piece with a knot in it, and then there was like this other piece that had some kind of like cracking and weird coloration, but there really wasn't much to work around. So I just started breaking down my lumber into pieces for my tabletop, my stretchers, and my legs. This piece gets no complicated designs or any sort of complicated drawings. She sent me a picture of something that she liked, and then I did this very rough napkin sketch just for me to basically calculate the wood that I need, and this is what we're going off of. Once I rough cut all of my pieces to size, I need to mill all of my lumber. And whenever you're trying to mill your lumber, what you're trying to do is get three flat, straight sides, right? So the top and the bottom, you want that nice and flat, and then you want one straight line so that you can get it through your table saw so that you can start gluing things together and making your panels. So they make a tool for accomplishing this called a jointer. And I don't actually own one, even as somebody who does woodworking for a living. And I used to own one. I had a 6-inch jointer. And the reason I got rid of it is I have a 90% rule in my shop. So my shop is a home garage, so I don't have unlimited space in here. And anytime I bring in a tool that's like big like that, my rule is it needs to be able to do 90% of my work. And the majority of my work is large furniture. And so a 6-inch jointer, I just found that most of the time it sat there while I used other methods or hired out my milling. And so my lumber suppliers out of Phoenix, they will mill all of my material. It doesn't matter how much I buy for 35 bucks. And you, if you're getting into woodworking, when you find a lumber yard, you can probably find something similar. And so that is the path I'd recommend going. And then even if I had a jointer, I couldn't mill the lumber for a project for 35 bucks. Like there's no way for the time I'm going to have to put into it. I just can't get that back for my client. So then, to me, it just makes no financial sense whatsoever to get a jointer. But there are moments when you do need to mill something at home. And so when those times come up, I have like alternative methods for dealing with that that work for me mostly. And then if I get in a real pickle, I have a commercial shop down the road that I take it to, and then they can do stuff for me if it's really, really like huge or heavy and I can't get it around the shop or something like that. So with that being said, I'm going to show you how you can mill your lumber properly without a jointer, because I think most beginning woodworkers are not going to own one. It is pretty miserable, but it's a good reminder. Anyway, okay, so here are my boards, and what you see here is just a piece of laminate shelving. It's nice and flat, and it has this melamine, and that's the key. to this. It's just, it needs to be flat. It needs to be a surface where we can unstick things pretty easily. This is a sled, basically. We're going to run this through our planer and use that to flatten our wood. So let's see. I don't know if you can see that there's a slight rock in this board, but you can usually tell, because if you can easily spin a piece of wood, it's not flat. Okay, so I need to shim this up. I need to feed this through the planer, referencing this flat sled that I have. And to do that, though, I need to keep this from moving around. So I use shims, and these are just like offcuts from other projects, the little skinny things that you have left over. Or if you don't have any of those, you can also use something like playing cards. And then sometimes, especially if it's not a huge gap, you can just use the hot glue itself. Okay, so now nothing's moving, and you're going to want to just hot glue your board to the MDF, and make sure that you also hot glue your whatever you're using as a shim so it doesn't shift around. And then while that's cooling, you'll want to take a pencil and just maybe make some marks across here. If your lumber is not super rough, sometimes it can be hard to tell where the planer has worked and where it hasn't. And so you might think you have a flat board when in fact you don't. And so now I'm just going to run this through the planer until I get one flat side. And I'm going to do that to all of the boards, getting them all flat on one side. And then once that's done, I'm going to work them down on the other side to get the other side nice and flat, and then also get them all to even thicknesses. Another tip when you're milling your lumber, even after you've cut your rough parts, you're gonna want to do this process on a few extra boards, because something might happen where you need another part, and it's really hard to get something down to the exact same thickness after you've moved your setup. So I just find that it's easier for you to go ahead and mill up some extra lumber and have it laying around just in case you need it. Once you have your board secured to the sled, then you just run it through the planer. Usually it's going to take you a few passes to get it nice and flat. But then once that's done, you just use like a paint scraper or an old chisel to pop it off of your sled, and then you rinse and repeat. And for the sake of YouTube and people watching videos and short attention spans, I've edited this down significantly. But I just want you to know, when you're in your shop and you're doing stuff like this, don't feel discouraged when it takes you a long time. In reality, this process probably took me like anywhere between, say, 3 and like 6 hours. I'm pretty sure I had to come out the next day and finish it up. So it's not a fast process. And I'm just going to say that about woodworking in general. Like when you watch it happen, everything seems so much faster than it happens in real life. Once you have a flat side on the board, you no longer need the sled. You're going to use the flat side of the board as the reference side, and you're going to run the other side through the planer to get it flat and parallel. And then you also want to do all of your lumber at the same time, so they're also at equal thickness. What I am going to say about using a planer that took me longer than I care to admit to figure out is that the closer you get to flat on a board, the more work a planer has to do. So you're going to want to lighten your passes as you move forward. At the beginning, you're essentially skip planing because you're going to be hitting some high spots, and so the planer's not having to remove nearly as much material. But when you get closer to flat, it's pretty much having to remove material from almost the entire board, and so it's doing a lot more work. This is going to give you much better results, like less tear out and things like that. And then the other thing is it's going to tax your machine less. There's 4 general ways that a board cannot be flat, and we've taken care of 3 of them by flattening and planing our boards. And now we're focusing on this 4th way, which is the board not being straight. If you've watched some of my prior videos, this is a method that I use quite frequently for shorter boards in my shop. So the setup is a 7-foot level clamped to my fence. And the whole purpose in the level is just extending a straight surface to run a board against. And doing this, you can joint boards that are a little under half the length of your level. And all you're going to do is take the inside curve of the board and keep both points against the level as you run the board through the table saw. The reason why you can only do boards that are about half the length of the level is that those 2 points must be in contact with the level for the entire duration of the cut. If you have one hanging off before or after the cut, the board will shift, and this just means that you're going to transfer the curve to the other side of the board as it runs through the blade, and it can also be very dangerous. But I'm sure right now that you're saying, but Bethany, what about those long boards that you're going to need for your tabletop? How do you put a straight edge on those? Well, I have a few different methods, but this one is very simple and also uses your table saw. And all you do is take a known straight edge, double side tape it to your board, and use that straight edge as a guide to run through your table saw, giving you a straight edge on the new board. As it so happens, I think Clyde must have jointed a few of these boards for a project, and he ended up not needing them because I had a couple of boards that already had a straight edge on them. So I went ahead and used that as my reference edge. Once I had that securely attached to the board that I needed to joint, I just took it to my table saw, set the fence, and then ran it through. And you'll see that this comes out with a nice straight 90-degree edge. And you're also going to notice this little sliver of wood that comes off of the blade right here. You're going to want to save that for the next time you need to flatten your boards, and you can use those as shims. Now that we have our board surfaced on 3 sides, the very last thing to do is clean up that last edge so that we have nice rectangular boards. And then they're going to be ready for gluing up into whatever kind of panels we need to make. So that's all I did, is I took all of my boards over to my table saw and I just ripped that last side down. You're going to find, if you're new to woodworking, that you spend a lot of time making rectangles. So just get ready for it. So that's where I'm going to leave this video. Next week, I'm going to start gluing up all of my parts, and I'm also going to show you how you can make curved pieces using templates and your router. Thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and for subscribing and sharing me with your friends and family.